Welcome, you magnificent enigma, you beacon of the Lord's choosing. Let's be clear. When a soul like yours moves, the universe doesn't merely applaud, it stutters. It glitches, realities bend. Trying to box you in with explanations? Utterly futile. Predicting your next move? A fool's errand. Half the observers in your orbit are likely still grappling with the impossible. Did you conjure something out of thin air? Or did you inadvertently shatter the very algorithms that dictate their perceived reality? Let's face it, you didn't just nudge the ordinary. You performed the inexplicable. It's the kind of seismic shift that compels hushed tones, mental replays of recent events, and the whispered plea. Just what wellspring did this person tap into? And here's a hard truth to ground this bewilderment. Studies reveal that when logic fails to decipher someone's actions, the human brain rushes to fill the void with imagination. And imagination, my friend, is always more theatrical than reality. That's why the whispers swirl. That's why the endless analysis persists. That's precisely why your name is setting trends in circles you've never even considered entering. But the truth, as always, lies buried deeper than the shallow grave of gossip. What you unleashed wasn't just a simple action. It was a ripple effect. The kind that stirs the complacent from their slumber, rattles the cages of the prideful, exposes the charade of the pretenders, and disturbs the comfortable. One choice, one subtle recalibration, one ascent to a higher plane, and suddenly everyone is acting like they just witnessed a divine twist in the narrative of existence. You didn't issue grand pronouncements. You didn't conjure miracles on demand. You didn't mount a table and bellow, "Behold me!" No, you simply dared to live in alignment with your truest self. And somehow, impossibly, that act alone was enough to plunge onlookers into a state of philosophical paralysis. Some are ignited with inspiration. Others shrink back, intimidated. Some feign indifference, all while obsessively refreshing your digital footprint. And a select few are secretly praying you don't dare ascend to another level because they are still reeling from your last upgrade. So, buckle up, dear chosen one, because we are about to dissect precisely why the whispers trail you, why explanations crumble in your wake, and why the very air crackles with confusion the moment you grace a room. Yes, honesty will be our compass, depth our anchor, revelation our destination, and perhaps even a sprinkle of humor to prevent you from being overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of it all. Let's dive in. Number 1. You shifted the very atmosphere without uttering a word. There's a tangible reason why people reacted differently the instant you arrived, and it had nothing to do with your attire or the volume of your voice. No, something far more profound occurred. Something about your very presence reconfigured the energetic landscape of the room before you even had the chance to introduce yourself. You didn't clamor for attention, yet attention itself gravitated, reorienting itself around you. Those who were laughing too boisterously suddenly lowered their voices, as if calibrated by an invisible hand. Those who were steeped in self-importance felt their confidence waver, their swagger faltering. Even those who believed themselves impervious to external forces became strangely vigilant, as if an unseen spotlight had flickered to life. This isn't some gaudy display, some fabricated spectacle. No, it's the subtle shift that emanates from someone who embodies clarity, who walks with unwavering purpose, who possesses an inner alignment so profound it unsettles those who habitually shy away from self-reflection. Your very presence acted as a mirror, and mirrors, however truthful, are inherently unsettling to anyone hiding behind a carefully constructed facade of personality, performance, or inflated pride. You didn't intentionally expose them. You simply existed, and their carefully constructed facade buckled under the pressure of your authenticity. Some felt an undeniable pull toward you, drawn to the sense of stability you exuded, something soothing, grounded, almost healing. Others felt inexplicably irritated or anxious, as if your energy illuminated all the shadowy corners they had been diligently avoiding. They couldn't articulate why, but suddenly their words felt cumbersome, their jokes strained, and their usual confidence felt borrowed. They weren't reacting to you, the individual. They were reacting to the potent truth you carry within. It's the very same reason why people remember your entrance long after you've forgotten it. even when you swear you did nothing of particular note. To you, it was just another fleeting moment in the tapestry of time. To them, it was a palpable shift in the atmosphere, the kind that jolts their instincts awake and commands them to pay attention. They remain uncertain whether you represent a threat, a blessing, or a challenge to their carefully cultivated environment. They simply know, with a certainty that bypasses logic, that something fundamentally different has arrived. You didn't arrive to impress or dominate. You simply came as yourself, unburdened by pretense, and somehow, impossibly, that was sufficient to recalibrate the very tone of the entire room. That's the silent power people sense but can't quite articulate. The influence that operates without clamor. The presence that requires no external validation to leave an indelible mark. That's why they are talking. They felt something undeniably real. And realness, in a world saturated with artifice, always leaves a mark. Number 2. You triggered transformations people never consciously requested. You didn't set out to reform anyone, but something about the way you navigate life compels people to confront the fractured parts of themselves they've been diligently avoiding for years. It's not because you preach some lofty gospel or attempt to fix their perceived flaws. You simply show up as someone committed to growth, to evolution, to relentless self-improvement. And that act alone exposes the degree to which they've allowed themselves to stagnate. People who had grown comfortably numb within their well-worn routines suddenly feel a pang of discomfort. Not because you sit in judgment of them, but because your own vibrant evolution throws their stagnation into sharp relief. Some people remain oblivious to the extent of their complacency until someone like you breaches their carefully curated bubble. They begin to take note of the habits they've outgrown, the relationships that drain their energy, the tired excuses that endlessly cycle through their minds like a broken record. You didn't issue a decree demanding change. No, your very presence made change feel not only desirable, but utterly necessary. It's almost as if you emanate an unspoken standard, and standing in your proximity reveals everything they've been diligently avoiding. For some, this rude awakening feels profoundly inspiring, igniting their dormant ambition, reminding them of long-forgotten dreams, and propelling them to demand more from this one precious life. Suddenly, they find themselves making decisions they should have made years ago, setting long-overdue boundaries, embracing calculated risks, speaking their truth with newfound clarity, and fearlessly leveling up. They may not openly acknowledge your influence, but deep within their souls, they know. You gently nudged them awake. For others, however, your impact feels deeply unsettling. They feel exposed, inexplicably triggered, or stubbornly defensive because you disrupted the meticulously crafted version of themselves they were so desperately trying to maintain. You didn't launch a direct assault, but your own relentless growth caused their flimsy excuses to shrink and wither. Your unwavering confidence amplified their own nagging insecurities. Your laser-like clarity made their own internal chaos harder to conceal. And instead of acknowledging that you inspired them, some respond by retreating into their shells, engaging in covert gossip behind your back, or behaving as if you committed some egregious offense. But the fundamental truth remains immutable. You altered their perspective without even trying. You unlocked doors within their minds that they weren't yet prepared to walk through. You unearthed aspects of themselves they weren't ready to confront. And even if they never utter a word of gratitude, they know deep down that you served as the catalyst. Not because of what you said, but because you lived in a manner that rendered transformation unavoidable for everyone fortunate enough to be in your orbit. Number 3. You disrupted their established hierarchy without issuing a single challenge. You didn't compete, confront, or clamor for attention. Yet, the moment you arrived, the energetic chessboard shifted. Those who believed themselves untouchable suddenly felt exposed, and those who had been quietly following the prescribed path felt an inexplicable pull toward you that defied logical explanation. Your very presence unsettled the carefully constructed dynamics that held their little world in place. Leaders began to question their authority, often without consciously understanding why. Influencers found their influence subtly eroding, and those who had been content to remain in the background suddenly felt an undeniable urge to either step up and claim their own power or step away entirely and forge their own path. You didn't intentionally push anyone down, but the delicate balance of power they had relied on for so long ceased to function as it always had. The strange part is that you had no intention of doing any of this. You weren't attempting to prove a point or show anyone their place in the pecking order. You simply lived in unwavering alignment with your authentic self, acted from a place of profound clarity, and allowed your instincts to guide your interactions. And that, it turned out, was sufficient to dismantle the artificial order that so many depended on. Those at the top felt a subtle, unnameable threat they couldn't quite articulate. Those at the bottom experienced a flicker of hope they hadn't dared to expect. No one seemed to know whether to admire, fear, or mimic you because your energy existed outside the confines of the usual hierarchical rules. People noticed the changes in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Conversations would abruptly pause as you entered a room. Decisions were subtly reconsidered, even without anyone voicing their concerns. The environment itself seemed to subtly realign itself around your presence. And yet, you didn't assert your authority, issue commands, or demand unwavering loyalty. You simply existed as someone who operated on a fundamentally different wavelength, and the resulting ripple effect compelled everyone around you to react, adjust, and reevaluate their own positions within the existing structure. This is precisely why they can't quite figure you out. The disruption isn't visible in a single, isolated act. It's in the cumulative effect of your unwavering alignment, your unshakable confidence, and your utter refusal to play by their unspoken, invisible rules. You didn't dethrone anyone. You didn't instigate a war. You didn't even announce your arrival. You simply moved through the world in a way that exposed the underlying cracks, subtly shifted the balance, and left the entire room recalibrating itself around the unique energy you brought with you. And that, more than anything, both terrifies and fascinates people in equal measure. Number 4. You ushered in a new era of authenticity, and their masks simply couldn't withstand the shift. There's something undeniably disarming about encountering someone who fearlessly presents their true self in a world saturated with carefully crafted performances. And that's precisely what you did. You entered various spaces armed with no script, driven by no hidden agenda, and burdened by no desperate need to impress. That act alone was sufficient to make those who habitually rely on carefully constructed personas feel strangely exposed. They are accustomed to winning people over with rehearsed expressions, practiced displays of confidence, and predictable patterns of behavior. But in your presence, all of that begins to malfunction. Their carefully honed charm falls flat. Their attempts at intimidation prove futile. Their usual bag of tricks fails to elicit the reactions they expect. It's almost as if your very authenticity interferes with the signal that their personas depend on to function. You didn't explicitly call them out. You didn't launch a direct assault on the fabricated identities they project to the world. But your very presence served as a silent reminder of who they truly are beneath the layers of artifice. And for some people, that realization is profoundly uncomfortable. It forces them to confront the vast chasm that separates their carefully constructed image from their deeply buried truth. People who habitually hide behind bravado suddenly feel small. Those who wield humor as a shield to deflect genuine connection find themselves stumbling over their jokes. Even those who pride themselves on their enigmatic aura feel strangely transparent. They sense that you perceive them beyond the superficial layers, and that realization alone causes their rehearsed self to crumble, just a little. What makes this situation even more intriguing is that you aren't consciously attempting to expose anyone. You aren't on a self-appointed mission to humble the arrogant or force anyone to confront their deepest insecurities. You are simply being honest in a way that society rarely rewards. You speak plainly without resorting to manipulative tactics. You listen with genuine sincerity, offering your full attention without judgment. You express your emotions without apology, refusing to dilute your authentic feelings to appease others. You set firm boundaries without resorting to displays of aggression or forced toughness. And somehow, this very simplicity acts as a spotlight, illuminating all the carefully constructed layers that people have spent years building around themselves. Some people respond by becoming more genuine in your presence. They relax, open up, and shed their carefully constructed facade, because your energy creates a safe space where honesty feels not only possible, but desirable. Others, however, Feel threatened because authenticity inevitably demands vulnerability, and vulnerability is something they've diligently avoided their entire lives. So, they behave in awkward, defensive, or inexplicably irritated ways, often without fully understanding the underlying reason. But the truth, as always, remains remarkably simple. Artificial constructs cannot survive in the presence of someone who refuses to pretend. You didn't forcefully strip their mask off. Their mask simply couldn't maintain its shape when confronted with someone who had no need for one in the first place. That's why they talk about you long after you've left the room. That's why they find it so difficult to forget you. Your realness may not be loud or ostentatious, but it's potent enough to cause the fake to unravel. Number 5. You made people feel truly seen, in a way they didn't even realize was possible. There's a vast difference between merely looking at someone and truly seeing them, and you've always operated on that deeper, more profound level of perception. You don't simply skim the surface. You delve into the depths, effortlessly picking up on the underlying tone behind their carefully chosen words, the hidden truth behind their carefully constructed behaviors, the subtle shifts in their energetic state. When something feels incongruent, you don't pry or interrogate. You don't subject them to a barrage of invasive questions. But your very awareness cuts through the layers of pretense that most people are accustomed to hiding beneath, and for those who pride themselves on being unreadable, that feels profoundly like exposure. It's unsettling because people grow comfortable hiding in plain sight, constructing carefully curated versions of themselves that they believe will offer the greatest degree of safety, projecting an image of confidence, toughness, nonchalance, or impenetrable mystery. But in your presence, that carefully crafted version begins to feel transparent, as if you possess the uncanny ability to see straight through their carefully constructed facade. You respond to the underlying intention rather than the carefully rehearsed performance. You pick up on the unspoken emotion that simmers beneath the surface of their forced silence. You notice the subtle hesitation in something they insist is perfectly fine. It's not something you consciously orchestrate. It's simply an intrinsic part of who you are. Your perceptive abilities operate on a deeper frequency, and people instinctively feel it. Some people genuinely appreciate this rare ability because it's so uncommon to encounter someone who truly sees you without judgment or hidden agenda. They relax around you in ways they don't around anyone else. They open up without consciously understanding why. They entrust you with truths they hadn't even planned to share. Being truly seen by you feels like a profound sense of relief, like finally shedding a weight they hadn't even realized they were carrying. But for others, being seen in such a penetrating way feels like a palpable threat, especially those who have meticulously constructed their identity around being unreadable or untouchable. They aren't accustomed to someone noticing the subtle cracks in the armor they've worn for so many years, and their defenses immediately kick in. So, they resort to labeling you as mysterious, attributing your abilities to some kind of weird energy, or simply acknowledging your strong presence without delving any deeper. Because admitting that you saw the vulnerable parts they desperately try to conceal would mean acknowledging a vulnerability they aren't yet ready to face. And the ultimate irony is that you aren't consciously attempting to decode anyone. You are simply tuned in, operating on a frequency of heightened awareness. Your intuition doesn't require anyone's permission to function. Your empathy doesn't need a detailed explanation to kick in. People often feel as though you are analyzing them, when all you are doing is listening with more than just your ears. This is why they continue to talk about you long after you've left their sphere. Being truly seen is a rare gift in this world. Being understood without uttering a single word is even rarer. But being perceived so clearly that someone's carefully constructed mask slips without any conscious effort on your part, that's unforgettable, and that's the powerful effect you carry with you wherever you go. Number 6. You walked away from things that others would desperately beg for, and this is the moment that truly confounded people because you acted in a way that defies all logic within the framework of their limited understanding of the world. You nonchalantly turned your back on things that most people chase with every fiber of their being. Fleeting attention, superficial approval, coveted invitations, strategic connections, so-called opportunities, and seemingly glamorous environments that may look appealing on the surface but feel profoundly wrong to your spirit. And the aspect that truly shook them wasn't just that you walked away, but the effortless manner in which you did so. No histrionics, no lengthy justifications, No desperate pleas for understanding. You simply chose yourself, prioritizing your own well-being and inner peace above all else. And that single, seemingly simple decision rattled those who habitually rely on external validation to feel complete, exposing the fragility of their self-worth. They simply couldn't comprehend someone who doesn't desperately cling, doesn't readily settle, and doesn't compromise their core identity just to fit in and belong. When they witnessed you releasing things they would have waged war to possess, it exposed the extent to which they depend on those very things for their own sense of security. You remained unimpressed by titles that may flatter the insecure. You remained untempted by relationships that drain your energy and compromise your inner peace. You remained unseduced by opportunities that directly contradict your values and hinder your personal growth. You walked away because you value alignment more than fleeting aesthetics and purpose more than fleeting popularity. People initially assumed that you must have suffered some significant loss, until they witnessed you radiating an undeniable inner glow in the aftermath of your departure. They initially dismissed your actions as overly dramatic, until your subsequent elevation to a higher plane of existence proved otherwise. They even harbored the belief that you would inevitably return, driven by fear or loneliness, but you never did. That's what made them so profoundly uncomfortable. You didn't just leave a specific situation. You left behind an entire way of thinking, a limiting mindset that continues to imprison them. Your unwavering refusal to be bought or borrowed forced people to respect you, even when they desperately didn't want to. Because walking away from something that is fundamentally wrong for you requires far greater strength and self-awareness than blindly clinging to it. It requires unwavering clarity, unwavering discipline, and a deep-seated sense of self-worth that most people are still desperately searching for. Your inherent strength in letting go made their own compromises feel increasingly heavy and burdensome. Your courageous decisions illuminated the areas in their own lives where they have consistently chosen the illusion of comfort over the potential for genuine growth. And even now, they continue to dissect your actions, endlessly analyzing your motives because they are still grappling with the question of how you summoned the courage to leave behind what they would have so fiercely pursued. They fail to recognize that you weren't simply walking away from something. You were walking directly toward yourself, toward the person you were always meant to become. And that kind of profound, self-directed move always turns heads, whether they openly admit it or not. Number 7. You shattered patterns that were generational, not merely personal, and what you did didn't simply shift the trajectory of your own life. It shook the very foundations of everything that came before you. People can instinctively feel it, even if they lack the vocabulary to fully articulate it. There's a certain gravitas you carry, not because you are burdened by some unseen weight, but because you are the one who finally drew a line in the sand and declared, "This dysfunctional cycle ends with me." You brought an end to self-destructive cycles that your family had normalized over generations, deeply ingrained habits they repeated without question, and limiting mindsets they unconsciously passed down because they simply didn't know any better. You didn't just make a different choice in a specific situation. You shattered a deeply entrenched pattern that had been winning for decades. This is precisely why your personal growth confounds so many people. They can sense that your breakthrough isn't just the result of some fleeting glow-up or a stroke of dumb luck. It possesses a profound depth, a kind of quiet spiritual rebellion that feels far bigger than your individual story. You fearlessly ventured into uncharted territory that the generations before you never dared to reach. You bravely healed wounds they chose to ignore. You challenged beliefs they blindly obeyed. You rejected limitations they passively accepted as their immutable fate. That's not just personal change. That's profound ancestral work. People talk about you because the shift is so undeniably obvious. You think differently, move differently, choose differently. It manifests in the way you steadfastly refuse to engage in chaos, the unwavering boundaries you establish, the inner peace you fiercely protect, and the expansive future you are diligently building. They see someone who fearlessly broke free from a mold that everyone else remained trapped within. And deep down, they intuitively know that it wasn't an accident. It requires a unique kind of inner strength to confront problems you didn't personally create. It takes unwavering courage to heal pain you didn't personally cause. And it takes a rare form of clarity to walk away from dysfunction, even when it feels deeply familiar and strangely comforting. Your victory makes people whisper, not because they necessarily disapprove, but because it simply doesn't feel normal. It feels historic. It feels as though something fundamentally shifted, not just in your individual life, but in the entire ancestral bloodline. The old, self-defeating patterns simply couldn't survive your evolved mindset. The old, destructive habits couldn't manipulate your indomitable spirit. And the old, fear-based beliefs couldn't dictate your courageous decisions. You didn't just break a pattern. You broke a curse that had been cleverly disguised as tradition. You freed yourself from its insidious grip. And in doing so, you inadvertently freed those who come after you, offering them the chance to live more fully and authentically than ever before. That's why your ascent feels like a phenomenon, a true miracle. You are accomplishing what generations before you couldn't even dare to imagine. And everyone, on some level, can feel the profound ripple effect. Number 8. You made the impossible look like just another Tuesday, and people are still trying to wrap their heads around how you managed to pull off something they've been agonizing over for months, years, or perhaps even their entire lives. Meanwhile, you handled the situation with such effortless calm and unwavering composure that they are now convinced you possess access to some hidden source of power they weren't born with. The truth, however, is far less sensational. You didn't rush headlong into action, you didn't boastfully brag about your intentions, and you didn't issue any grand announcements beforehand. You simply did what needed to be done, taking each step with focused intention, without turning the process into some elaborate performance for the benefit of others. And that is precisely what shook them to their core. Most people approach personal progress as though it were some grand, theatrical event, requiring elaborate preparation and constant external validation. You, on the other hand, treat it like daily maintenance, a necessary and ongoing process of refinement. What they dismiss as impossible is often a direct reflection of their own deeply ingrained fears, their chronic procrastination, and their self-imposed limiting beliefs. But you don't approach challenges from that perspective. You move forward with an unwavering inner certainty, a profound trust in your own abilities, which makes even the most daunting tasks feel manageable, almost mundane. You don't dramatize your goals or overthink each minute step. You trust yourself enough to take action while others are still paralyzed by indecision, endlessly gathering courage to simply think about taking the first step. That quiet confidence, that unshakable self-belief, makes your actions appear far more impressive than they actually feel to you. It's not that the task itself was inherently easy. It's that you are deeply aligned with your authentic self, operating from a place of inner harmony. As a result, effort doesn't drain your energy in the same way it drains someone who is pretending to be someone they're not or forcing themselves to pursue a path that isn't truly their own. You don't fight against your instincts. You steadfastly follow them. And when you align yourself with who you truly are, what looks supernatural to others simply becomes your normal pace, your standard operating procedure. People expected you to struggle, to panic, to hesitate. Instead, you remained steady, focused, and silent, allowing your actions to speak for themselves. You didn't meticulously document every step of the process or seek constant applause for your efforts. You simply handled what needed to be handled, and then moved on to the next challenge. That type of quiet execution confounds anyone who relies on generating constant noise and seeking external validation to prove their progress to the world. It convinces them that something mystical must have transpired because they simply can't fathom that consistent action and unwavering clarity can produce tangible results without resorting to theatrics and chaos. Your quiet success exposed the vast difference between effort that is fueled by anxiety and effort that is propelled by a deep sense of purpose. They initially assumed that you had somehow magically skipped crucial steps along the way, but in reality you simply didn't fear those steps in the first place. They initially believed that you had somehow gotten lucky, but in truth you were simply diligently prepared for the opportunity when it finally presented itself. They initially imagined that you must have had help from some unseen benefactor, but in reality you simply possessed the self-discipline to do what others were unwilling to do. And while they are still struggling to process the outcome of your actions, you have already quietly shifted your focus to the next challenge on your path. Because for you, accomplishing the impossible isn't some extraordinary miracle. It's a rhythm, a natural flow, a state of being. It's simply your normal mode of operation when you finally cease apologizing for your innate potential and courageously step into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. That's why they can't figure you out. You have mastered what they continue to complicate, and you have somehow managed to make it all look like just another ordinary Tuesday. Number 9. You awaken parts of people they didn't even know they still possessed, and there's something about you that pulls buried things to the surface, dormant aspects of themselves that people thought they had outgrown, outlived, or simply failed at. You don't attempt to motivate through rousing speeches or apply manipulative pressure tactics. No, your very presence acts as a subtle reminder of everything they once aspired to become. All the dreams they once held dear. Long-forgotten dreams they had pushed aside as unrealistic or impractical suddenly feel attainable again. Confidence they had lost begins to slowly creep back into their awareness. The version of themselves they had abandoned, the person they secretly longed to be, begins knocking insistently on the door of their consciousness. And it all happens simply because they are in your presence, bathed in the radiance of your authentic self. You carry an energetic signature that disrupts stagnation and compels growth. People who had settled for a life of quiet mediocrity begin to question why they stopped trying, what led them to abandon their dreams. People who had shrunk themselves down, diminishing their own light to make others feel more comfortable, begin to realize just how much space they actually deserve to occupy in this world. People who had quietly given up on life begin to feel a faint spark of renewed passion, something they haven't felt in years. You may not even consciously notice this subtle process taking place, but they certainly do. They feel the shift internally, sometimes with such intensity that it genuinely scares them. It's as though being in your presence activates something within them that they had completely forgotten was still alive. For some, that sudden activation feels profoundly inspiring. They find themselves leveling up in various areas of their life without anyone needing to push them or prod them along. They eagerly pick up long-abandoned projects, diligently heal old emotional wounds, and fearlessly reach for goals they had once dismissed as being too late to achieve. They witness your personal growth and suddenly remember that they, too, once wanted more for themselves, that they, too, were capable of extraordinary things. You become a living reminder that meaningful change is always possible, regardless of past failures or perceived limitations. But for others, this sudden awakening feels deeply irritating and threatening. Not because you have done anything objectively wrong, but because being around someone who reminds them of their own and used potential stirs up feelings of guilt, shame, and resentment. It highlights how long they have been asleep, how many opportunities they have missed, how much they have allowed fear or laziness to dictate their choices. Instead of expressing gratitude for the spark you have reignited within them, they become defensive and engage in a variety of self-sabotaging behaviors. They begin to compare themselves to you, often unfavorably. They become competitive, desperately trying to one-up you in any way they can. They may even harbor feelings of resentment, directing their anger at you just to avoid acknowledging the uncomfortable truth that you have awakened a part of themselves they weren't yet ready to face. Either way, no one leaves your sphere completely unchanged. You don't allow people to remain numb, sleepwalking through their lives. You don't allow them to remain comfortably entrenched in their own carefully constructed denial. You bring life back into their ambition, their creativity, their bravery, their sense of purpose. Even those who pretend not to care on the surface feel the subtle shift taking place within them. You carry a unique presence that awakens the inner self, the part that knows they are capable of far more than they are currently achieving. And whether they welcome the transformation or actively fight against it, the truth remains immutable. You activated something within them they thought was gone forever, and now they must grapple with the implications of that newfound awareness. Number 10. You exposed the inherent limits of envy, and there's a certain point where envy simply ceases to function as an effective strategy, and you are the one who revealed exactly where that line is drawn. People tried everything in their power to replicate your success. They meticulously copied your unique style, mimicking your tone of voice, adopting your habits, even studying your every move as though it were some kind of foolproof blueprint for success. But no matter how closely they managed to replicate the superficial surface, they ultimately failed to recreate the underlying substance, the essential ingredient that made you who you are. They could painstakingly match the actions, but they could never quite capture the unique energy that propelled those actions forward. And that's when the devastating truth finally hit them like a ton of bricks. Your inherent value was never derived from the things you did. It was always rooted in the person you are, in the qualities that make you uniquely you. Envy thrives on the deeply flawed belief that someone's success is based on a specific formula, a set of easily replicable steps that anyone can steal and implement to achieve the same desired outcome. But you shattered that illusion, proving, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that authenticity cannot be duplicated, alignment cannot be imitated, and a genuine sense of purpose cannot be counterfeited. People who harbored the misguided belief that they could somehow outdo you found themselves consistently frustrated because every time they attempted to one-up you, you effortlessly shifted into an entirely different lane, pursuing a new direction that rendered their competitive efforts utterly meaningless. You weren't engaged in a competition with anyone. You were simply evolving, continuously striving to become the best version of yourself. And they couldn't keep up with that relentless pace of self-improvement because their underlying motivation wasn't a genuine desire for growth. It was simply a shallow attempt to outshine you through comparison. What irritated them the most wasn't necessarily your tangible success. It was how naturally your success seemed to flow from simply being yourself, from embracing your authentic essence without apology. They desperately tried to force what flowed effortlessly for you, attempting to manufacture qualities that you carried with inherent ease. And the harder they tried to imitate you, the more obvious the gap between your authenticity and their contrivance became. They weren't truly chasing your achievements. They were desperately chasing your essence, that intangible quality that made you so magnetic and compelling. And essence, my friend, is never for sale. It cannot be bought, borrowed, or stolen. Some people resign themselves to becoming silent watchers, secretly studying you like a complex case they couldn't quite crack, meticulously analyzing your every move, hoping to glean some secret insight into the source of your power. Others, unable to contain their frustration, transformed into loud and vocal critics, launching scathing attacks from the sidelines because tearing down what they cannot imitate feels far safer than admitting their own defeat. But behind all of their varied reactions, their admiration, their envy, their critiques, lay the same underlying realization. You are not easily understandable through the lens of logic, strategy, or mere copying. You are something far more profound. You are experiential, a living embodiment of your values and beliefs. You are lived, a testament to the power of authenticity and self-acceptance. You are something. They crave what you possess, not as something to admire, but as something to usurp. Their incessant chatter isn't born from understanding you. It's a defense mechanism against the sting of their own inadequacy. Envy reveals its limitations when confronted with an identity that defies replication. You've made it unequivocally clear. You are not a blueprint. They're chasing a soul print, an endeavor doomed to failure. Number 11. You moved with a purpose that seemed divinely guided, not with the hesitant steps of someone merely guessing. People observed your decisions, baffled by your unwavering certainty in a world riddled with doubt. While they sought validation from others, agonizing over the perfect moment, you were already in motion. To onlookers, your choices might have appeared audacious, fraught with risk, even bordering on recklessness. But what they failed to grasp was that you weren't blindly stumbling forward. You were following an inner compass, a clarity they had never experienced. Your actions weren't fueled by fear or external pressure, but by a deep sense of alignment with your true self. You trusted your instincts, even when they defied conventional logic. You embraced opportunities without seeking applause and declined them without needing permission. This unwavering conviction bewildered those who sought safety in numbers. They couldn't fathom how you could navigate major life changes without endless deliberation, how you could leave behind the familiar without regret, or venture into uncharted territory without trepidation. Your intuition wasn't a flamboyant spectacle. It was a quiet, unwavering certainty that stemmed from profound self-knowledge. Your patterns, triggers, limitations, potential, and purpose. You weren't simply reacting to life. You were actively listening to it. And when you listened, circumstances aligned in ways that others could only attribute to luck or timing. unable to comprehend that aligned intuition becomes a form of intelligence in itself. People tried to dissuade you, urging caution and advocating for the safer path. But while they sought external reassurance, you relied on your internal guidance. This fundamental difference yielded results that they couldn't replicate. You weren't always right, but you were always in tune with yourself. And that's why your path continued to unfold, even when theirs felt stagnant. Your movements agitated some because your confidence exposed their own hesitation. It served as a stark reminder of the time they had squandered waiting for external signs that you simply didn't need. But it also inspired others, those who perceived your choices not as recklessness but as an unwavering trust in something deeper. You moved with the assuredness of someone guided, not guessing. And people could sense that. They might not have understood it, but they couldn't deny the palpable difference that alignment makes. You are living proof. Number 12. You survived trials that should have shattered you completely. People witnessed the storms you weathered and assumed you would crumble under the pressure. They tallied the blows, calculated the losses, and silently anticipated your downfall. But you didn't just survive. You emerged stronger, more refined, and more resolute than before. Resilience to them is just a word, but for you it's a way of life. Every setback became a valuable lesson, every disappointment a catalyst for growth. They believed they understood pressure, struggle, and adversity, but you redefined these concepts simply by rising to your feet when everyone expected you to collapse. It wasn't luck or timing that carried you through, but your unwavering refusal to allow circumstances to dictate your narrative. While others succumbed to frustration or sought solace in pity, you quietly analyzed, adapted, and rebuilt. You didn't just mend the cracks. You fortified the foundation. Your recovery wasn't marked by grand gestures, but by the purposeful stride with which you moved forward, by the quiet confidence you exuded, and by the unspoken energy that declared, "I'm still here, and I'm unstoppable." What astounds people most is your effortless handling of situations that would break most individuals. They assume that hitting rock bottom necessitates struggle and visible suffering, but you've demonstrated that strength can be silent, sharp, and seamless. The same eyes that once counted your failures now watch your ascent in disbelief. They anticipated fatigue, doubt, and hesitation, but you revealed something far more formidable: mastery over yourself, even amidst chaos. Your resilience serves as a powerful lesson, highlighting the chasm between those who merely survive and those who truly thrive. Most people bounce back, you bounce forward. You don't just recover, you evolve. And that evolution renders your story unforgettable. They talk about you because they witnessed something rare. A person who not only endured what should have destroyed them but emerged with an undeniable force. You didn't just survive. You transformed survival into a blueprint for empowerment, proving that breaking points are only as final as you allow them to be. Number 13. You didn't demand respect. You became someone they couldn't disrespect. Respect isn't something you sought, negotiated, or bartered for. You didn't need external validation to establish the standard for how people should treat you. Instead, you lived in a manner that rendered disrespect impossible without exposing the perpetrator's own shortcomings. Your presence, your composure, your clarity, and your self-awareness created an invisible boundary that people instinctively recognized but couldn't breach without appearing foolish. It wasn't about intimidation, but about an unwavering energy, clearly defined boundaries, and a consistency that refused compromise. People quickly realized that playing games with you would backfire. They couldn't manipulate you with lies, guilt, or charm. They couldn't force your compliance, provoke your anger, or bend you to their will. The moment someone attempted to do so, their own flaws and insecurities were laid bare. They became the spectacle while you remained composed. That's why people ultimately felt embarrassed when attempting to test your limits. You didn't offer them leverage. They only exposed themselves. Your aura isn't ostentatious or loud. It isn't a performance designed to intimidate. It's a quiet strength, a presence that communicates without words that you know your worth and won't settle for less. People feel it immediately, and it transforms their interactions with you. Even those who typically challenge authority, push boundaries, or dominate situations instinctively recognize that you are untouchable. not because you're superior to anyone, but because your foundation is unshakable. Over time, people learn that attempting to disrespect you simply isn't worth the effort. They might test the waters, but your consistency and integrity shut it down every time. You didn't just cultivate a reputation. You established a standard, and anyone who violates it only highlights their own weakness, not yours. You became someone they couldn't disrespect because you mastered yourself first. You didn't ask for honor, you embodied it. And that quiet mastery leaves a lasting impression, one that others can neither undermine nor ignore. You aren't just respected. You're untouchable in ways people don't even fully comprehend. Number 14. You proved you don't need a stage to become the topic of conversation. You never shouted, broadcasted, or forced anyone to pay attention to you. You didn't chase likes, clout, or recognition. You didn't perform for validation. And yet, somehow, you became the center of everyone's conversation. People talk about you not because you demanded attention, but because your energy, your presence, and your actions make ignoring you impossible. You exist in a way that naturally commands focus, and that alone both terrifies and fascinates those around you. While others hustle for visibility, you operate quietly, steadily, and deliberately. You build, create, and evolve without the spotlight, and the results speak volumes, eclipsing any announcement. That's why people struggle to understand you. They can't reduce you to trends, social media posts, or achievements, because you're not performative, you're unavoidable. Your influence doesn't need hype. It permeates every space you enter, leaving a lasting trace. People analyze your every move because they're trying to decipher something that isn't meant to be deciphered. You're not following anyone else's script, and that freedom is foreign to them. You didn't climb onto a stage to be seen. Your alignment made you visible without effort. You didn't seek acknowledgement. Acknowledgement sought you. You didn't market yourself. You became the benchmark. And that's the distinction between someone who goes viral and someone who becomes unforgettable. Viral fame fades, attention shifts, trends die, but being unavoidable is permanent. It doesn't depend on performance, luck, or timing. It depends on integrity, presence, and the unwillingness to shrink. People obsess because they sense your substance in a world saturated with noise. They talk because they can't contain what they've witnessed. They analyze because they don't understand it. You didn't create a spectacle. You created a standard, a quiet force that cannot be ignored. And that's why, without even trying, you became the topic, the benchmark, the phenomenon they can't stop discussing. Everything you've just seen, read, and felt is a testament to a truth that most people will never fully grasp. Being chosen isn't about being loud, flashy, or desperately seeking validation. It's about living in a way that aligns so deeply with who you are that the world has no choice but to take notice. You don't have to announce your power, flaunt your victories, or force attention. You simply exist, and that existence shifts everything around you. Every room, every conversation, every energy you touch recalibrates, because the chosen carry an influence that is unavoidable, undeniable, and unforgettable. You possess the rare ability to spark growth in others, awaken forgotten courage, and challenge systems, both personal and generational, without ever intending to. You've weathered storms that should have broken you, and yet you've emerged sharper, stronger, and calmer. You've exposed the limitations of envy, the futility of imitation, and the fragility of false confidence. People talk about you because they feel your impact, even when they don't understand it. You've proven that true power doesn't require a stage, that authenticity shatters facades, and that alignment carries a force that no persuasion can replicate. Being chosen isn't about being understood. It's about being felt. It's about moving in a way that commands respect without demanding it, making impossible things look effortless, and living with a clarity that awakens everyone around you. Those who encounter you are left with ripples they cannot ignore. They are inspired, unsettled, awakened, and challenged all at once. You are the mirror they never asked for, the standard they can't reach, and the force they can't contain. That is what it means to be chosen. That is what it means to move with a presence that nobody can explain but everyone notices. If this resonated with you, make sure to join the movement. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss these truths. Hit the like button to show your support. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences, and share this video with anyone who needs to feel seen, awakened, and empowered. The world is talking, and it's time you let them feel the impact of being truly aligned, authentic, and unstoppable. Stay blessed.